extra, read all about it. Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, extra, read all about it.
Okay. It has been a day, my friends. Oh my goodness. All right. Welcome back to a bonus Resistance Live. It's the 9th of May, 2024 still. Trump has just wound down another day in court, and we have a lot to talk about what happened in the last hour or so. It has been an extremely dramatic day and a very dramatic close, and we got a lot to talk about. All right. As always, I am ECM. I'm coming to you from occupied Tongva territory. I am wearing still, as I was this morning for our visually challenged viewers, a cream and black striped black, a little bit messier than it was this morning. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman. I'm sitting in front of my plant and my standing lamp and my chair, and my pronouns are she, her. It is a wild day. All right. So when we left off this morning, after this morning's regular broadcast, Stormy Daniels was on the stand for redirect. And the redirect itself was exceedingly short, to the point that between when I went on the air this morning and when I was done 25 minutes later, the redirect was over. And this in and of itself was a sign that the prosecution wasn't really worried about the cross-examination. However brutal it was, they knew that it had not really scored any points from the standpoint of the actual case itself. And then there was a little bit of a recross and a redirect, and then she was done. But the prosecution was very clear from the start that they knew that her testimony was credible. They weren't worried about any points having been scored on the cross, and they finished it. And, you know, I have to say that, by the way, this is not just about what they believed, but it's also a signal to the jury. Because when you have a cross-examination that spans really it was 3 days with the Wednesday being off, but, you know, essentially almost 2 full days of trial testimony. And then you have a redirect that's 25 minutes long. What you're saying to the jury is, that all kind of was meaningless. Like, we don't really need to pay attention to that. Here's the few little things that we want to clarify for you, and we're done. Very, very solid signaling to the jury about where the prosecution thinks it is in terms of Stormy Daniels' testimony. Okay, then we had a couple of document-related witnesses, another book-related witness. We had another witness from Trump's accounting department about how she sent the checks to the White House to be signed, and he signed on these checks to pay back Michael Cohen from the Oval Office. I'm still so disgusted by it. And then Madeleine Westerhout was the final witness, who happened to be, she was referred to as the greeter girl. I despise that terminology. The greeter girl inside the White House, because she was the person that everybody had to go through to get to Trump. Very young woman, but she also was responsible for receiving the checks that had been sent from New York through Keith Schiller, getting them to Trump to sign, and then getting them sent back up to New York. So one of the things that was really key about this is that we got testimony today from both sides about the checks leaving and the checks being received. And then we also shored up the testimony of people we've heard from before in the trial about the fact that Trump was deeply invested in managing the money. There was testimony today about how it was down to whether or not he was going to renew a golf membership, whether or not he was going to buy a frame from Tiffany's for a photograph of his mother. These tiny little details show that nothing slid through in terms of payouts from Trump without his express approval. Now, Madeleine Westerhout's cross-examination is still underway. They're going to finish that tomorrow morning. The prosecution, just essentially closed the loop on this in terms of how the checks went back and forth to New York through her. The defense, in terms of their cross-examination, are trying to show, 1, that she was naive, 2, that she didn't really know what she was doing, and 3, that, there were certain things that Trump rejected. And they're using her again. She was fired for leaking information to the press at a drunken dinner, and seems to feel very badly about it. But the point of all of this is that they are going to try to use her again. And they already did this, by the way, to try to show that Trump and Melania had this great relationship. There was some crazy testimony in the cross already about how Trump would call her when he was about to get onto Air Force One to make it look like he's a family man. You just have to have a moment where, again, I have to point out the defense is acting like they think the jury is stupid. And that's never going to play well to a jury. Everybody knows who this man is, right? And the testimony of Stormy Daniels is credible. essentially unflawed, unmarred by the cross-examination. And so the idea that now in the aftermath, you're going to try to take what was essentially one of Trump's secretaries to show that he had this wonderful, loving relationship with his wife is while he's signing payback checks from the Oval Office. I mean, it's a strategy. I don't really think it's a winning one. All right. So let's talk about what happened in the last hour and about 15 minutes. Okay. So we knew that this was coming. The judge was going to let, by the way, I'm getting like carpal tunnel in my wrist from how much I'm clicking between reporting accounts today. So forgive me for like rubbing my arm a little bit here on the air. One of the things that I want people to be aware of is that from the very beginning this morning, we knew the court was going to end at 4:00 because they were going to hear motions hearings this afternoon. All right. So one of the motions was, sorry, I know you guys all like it when I laugh, but I have to say there are just these moments that are so ridiculous, like just so scathingly ridiculous that you really wonder how it even could be that a lawyer would agree to make a motion like this, okay, would agree to put something like this in front of the judge. So at the, sorry, at the end of the trial today, Todd Blanche got up and essentially asked for permission for Donald Trump to violate the gag order. Basically, the motion was along the lines of he should be allowed to attack Stormy Daniels because Stormy Daniels said all these horrible things about him under oath. Okay. I have to point out that one, gag orders are there to protect the trial process, right? They're not there to do anything but that, right? They're there to protect witnesses, to protect the trial, to protect the sanctity of the jury, etc. Okay. And the idea that you should be allowed to violate a gag order so you can go to the press and essentially defame a witness in real time. I mean, I've never heard of anyone trying to do that. And I was in cases where there were protective orders. I was in cases where you were not allowed to discuss outside of court a whole host of information. No one ever asks for permission to violate a gag order to slam a witness who's testified against them. I mean, it's lunacy. This one I saw coming from a mile away, and there was just not a chance in hell that Judge Merchan was going to give Trump any room on this. Apart from anything else, as the prosecution pointed out when they argued why that request should be denied, he does this without any thought for the safety of the people that he's discussing on social media. And the prosecution revealed that just last night they had a conversation about the need for security for another witness because of what Trump has been saying on social media or has said historically. So it's not like there's not a real-time threat. But then in addition to that, trials permit defendants an opportunity to contradict evidence they don't like on the stand, whether that's by calling their own witnesses or by testifying themselves. And this was the point that Judge Merchan made. His remedy is to take the stand. If he doesn't like what's being said about him, his remedy is to have his legal team put on other evidence that essentially calls into question the story that Stormy Daniels has told. It's not for him to be able to run around on Truth Social and in front of all the media screaming about how Stormy Daniels is a liar. So, because she's not. So I just want everyone to be really clear here that there's just not any rational basis for that motion. And very clearly, Merchan saw right through it. Second motion they made was a second motion for a mistrial. And this went over like a lead balloon. I have to say that this one has been interesting for me to watch, especially after the first motion for a mistrial, which was denied at the end of last week, because one of the things that has been an issue here is the nature of Stormy Daniels' testimony about the sexual encounter, right? Or it's actually earlier this week. Because one of the things that has been an issue here is that, as I said, even this morning, the testimony about her encounter with Donald Trump is not actually relevant to whether or not he committed fraudulent document felonies, right? I mean, like he could have done it or not done it, and it doesn't really matter. The issue is whether or not he falsified business records to interfere with the election, to silence her, whether it was true or not. Okay. But the judge made a really important point in denying this, which is that, and this will bring you all the way back to what we discussed this morning, the Trump defense opened the door. And if you want to know what opening the door means in the context of witness testimony, you can go back and watch this morning's broadcast because I went into this. But essentially what the judge said is, you denied in your opening statement, defense, that he had ever had sex with her. And of course, they're allowed to put her on the stand and ask questions about the encounter and get her testimony about it to prove that your claim is false. They didn't do anything wrong by eliciting that testimony. You opened the door. You could have had him admit that he had sex with her, and then none of this would have been relevant, and we would be in a very different framework. But he also said something else that was very significant, which is that, as I have pointed out, and many other people pointed out, while this testimony was underway, Necklace did not object. And this is a point that, even Mershon has pointed out, because they raised this issue of her testifying about the fact that he didn't use a condom. And Mershon was like, yeah, and you didn't object to that. If you had a problem with it, you should have objected. And they didn't do it. So on top of it, in ruling to deny the mistrial here, he just absolutely laid into Trump's lawyers about the way in which they dropped the ball around this testimony. Now, apparently Trump was dozing off and on while this was happening in the courtroom. But I will just tell you that, this is not something that you want as an attorney with your client sitting next to you. Because essentially what the judge said was, your attorneys did not do their job. Now, for everyone who's going to ask the next question, I know it's coming. No, this does not set up an ineffective assistance of counsel appeal. No, it does not. Okay. We have not crossed that line yet. And I don't think we're going to. But what it does suggest is that, when you're putting on evidence, or the other side is putting on evidence from you, you better be awake. You think you've got a basis to not have that testimony entered into evidence? You better be on your feet objecting. And she didn't do that. So this is where we land. All right. And one of the things that I want everyone to be very mindful about here is that trials are moving, fluid, breathing events, so to speak. Okay. They are not ever open and shut. They're not cut and dried. And I've said to everybody here for the last 7.5 years that litigation is wildly unpredictable. Okay. The fact that they were not on their feet during Stormy Daniels' testimony objecting, as was pointed out to them, by the way, by the judge while she was testifying on Tuesday, that in and of itself is a sign of the fact that nothing was going on here that was remotely improper. Because even the judge at one point, sua sponte, said, I'm not allowing that. Objection sustained, and meaning he raised it himself. So, they didn't do what they should have done. First things first, that has led to this place in the trial. But I'll also just say that Judge Mershon was very, very clear on the record that there's no basis for a mistrial. Because if you're going to stand up in your opening statement and say the sex never happened, you can just bet your bottom dollar that the prosecution thereafter has a right to put Stormy Daniels on to testify about the sex. All right. So this was a very distinct and severe moment for Trump's legal team. And I'm just going to say this because I was thinking about this before I came on the air for this bonus broadcast. In case it's not clear to anybody here, he's losing. He's losing really badly. There's not anything that's happening in this trial that is working in his favor right now. They are not putting on a legitimate defense. Their cross-examination did not score any points. They have not actually raised any legitimate theory of the case that contradicts what the prosecution is putting forward. And they're losing every motion they put in front of this judge to try to stop it. So it's really not going well for them. And that's really good news for us. All right. Now, again, litigation is unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen next week. But I'm going to repeat it again right now. This prosecution has done a stellar job so far of putting on their case. I have no complaints about it. I think they've done a remarkable job, including the fact that after Stormy Daniels, they put on a few witnesses that were very low stakes to just give the jury a breather. So much of how you call witnesses at trial is also about the ebb and flow so that jurors have a moment to integrate what they have learned from really high stakes witnesses, and also to receive evidence that is relevant, that, kind of is dry and boring. It gives them a pause, a moment to recover. They're doing everything right. So I'm feeling really good about this so far. I just have to be honest. Now, Trump stormed out of court after this and gave a statement to the press where he just essentially laid into the judge and was screaming about a conflict and how the press should go look at the conflict. That is as close as he can get to the gag order without violating it by naming the judge's daughter. And he is big mad. So I'm just going to say this other thing here about this. All right. I would not be surprised one bit to see him violate the gag order between now and tomorrow. I said to everybody when we knew Stormy Daniels was being called on Tuesday that he was not going to be able to contain himself once she took the stand, that the public humiliation of it was going to be so severe that he wasn't going to be able to tolerate it. I am certain that he forced his attorneys to make a second motion for a mistrial, forced them to demand the judge to allow him to violate the gag order, and he's lost both of those. And essentially right now he's like a pressure cooker with no valve release. So I just want everybody to sit tight. We're going to see what happens next. But it has been a very good day for the prosecution in general. Very bad day for Donald Trump. And while I continue to be just disgusted by the cross-examination of Susan Necheles, I will also just say that I think the way the prosecution tied a bow on that testimony was extremely effective in front of the jury. And I think the jury is going to be left with a lot of compassion for Stormy Daniels, very little doubt about her credibility. And, we're in a position now where everything that she said stays in. So it's really great. Like we're in good shape right now. Now, predictions, just really quickly. We don't have very many witnesses left. And we know that the prosecution said that they were planning on winding down their case within the next 2 weeks. They said that on Monday. All right. Today, the judge told the jury that it was expected that the prosecution would take 2 more weeks. I don't think it's going to be that, because once we get through Madeleine Westerhout, now that we've had the accountants and the people inside the Trump organization who were responsible for mailing the checks and cutting the checks and all of that, Weisselberg's assistant, we've had all those people on the stand already. Really all that's left is Michael Cohen. And I'm just going to say this. I told you all at the very beginning of this trial that I would not be surprised if Michael Cohen was the final witness. So we could have Michael Cohen on the stand starting tomorrow or starting Monday, and he could be the final witness for the prosecution. So we'll see how this goes. But it's been a really interesting day here. And and I'm going to have my Schadenfreude moment about what just happened, because the judge was really not happy. And you can go read what he said, but he was done with the defense's tactics. And you don't want to be that attorney in front of a judge at this point in a trial. You really don't. For everybody who missed it, while all of this was going on, Taylor Swift did a Tortured Poets Department set live in Paris as a part of the Eras Tour. All new. I was watching it on the live stream at the same time. So much fun. You should go find it. It's amazing. A little bit of the self-care for the night for those of you who are Swifties. And I will be back here tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern, as always, because it's definitely going to be a wild Friday in Trump land. That is guaranteed. And I want to thank you all for being here. Hit the thumbs up on this broadcast, please. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. I'm here 5 days a week, sometimes twice a day. And if you become a paid subscriber over at patreon.com/resistance live, you also get to join us for Sunday Progressive Coffee Hour, which is super fun. And you can ask me questions before every broadcast for as little as $2 a month. It's like the steal of the century. So head on over there and do that. All right. I will catch you all here tomorrow. Thank you all so much for being here. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and hang on for the ride, my friends, because it's not over yet. All right. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.